This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I am Vito here for this special NCAA tournament preview edition of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And alongside me are two of the Oster clan, Oster brothers and Joey and Craigen Oster, and mi hermano, Dominic Churko, who has been a guest on these airwaves via the DSP Network for many, many years now. And to the Oster brothers here that have joined me from afar, how are you guys doing? Starting with you, Joey, the elder statesman of the Oster brothers here.
It's the best time of year. It's March. We're ready to look at this bracket, and it's a family affair. Like you said, we got the two pairs of brothers, and I love brothers. The more the merrier.
You love brothers.
I love brothers.
Good. That's a good start.
I too love brothers, and I love my own brother. I'm pumped to be here, man.
Please.
Craigen Oster.
You're credentialed and everything now?
I'm a law student at Wayne State University currently. I'm the younger brother of Joe Oster and a former St. Thecla Hawk, like everyone else in this room. I'm excited to be here and talk some tournament, baby.
Everybody has flown high as a St. Thecla Hawk for many, many years, even after graduating from St. T's. Now, Michigan. How happy should we be about Michigan right now after losing 3 times in one season, this regular season, to Michigan State? How do you react to that, Joey? And is Michigan ready for the big dance, you think?
So, I think Michigan's ready. I think, honestly, they're one of the more ready teams in the tournament. Obviously, they had those 3 blemishes against State within the past couple weeks, I think it is. But my rule for rivalry games is almost always, you almost have to throw out the results. Especially those 3 games played out exactly the same way. I know Craigen agrees with me on this, but Michigan looked great early on. And then for whatever reason, whether it's Cassius or just, I guess State has Michigan's number this year. They fall apart at the end, and this is something I've said all year about this Michigan team. I love them. I think they're very deep. I think they complement each other very well, especially that top 5 of Xavier, Chuck Matthews, Iggy, Teskey, and who am I forgetting here, Craigen? Who's the 5th? Oh, Jordan Poole, of course, Swaggy. So with those 5, they complement each other very well in ways, offensively, defensively. But then, for whatever reason, if there's a little bit of adversity sometimes, they all fall apart and they all become, instead of the sum is greater than the whole of its parts or whatever the saying is, they become way less than that, and they just can't click it back on. Once it's gone in the game, it's gone for the rest of the time.
Iggy, and I'll give you the mic too for you to talk, Craigen, but really quick, I want to interject and bring up a very, I think, astute point. Iggy Brzezikis, great player, sexier human being. Okay, love the guy, but really, honestly, now on the basketball floor, I think he's very key to what Michigan does in the big dance.
I agree, actually. That was one of the things I was thinking about going to that game, was the fact that he fouled out in that second Michigan State matchup, and he had 20 points at the time. He was the only one that was really taking it to State, trying to get into it with the crowd, taunting, just getting the ball to the hole when everyone else was kind of just falling into their usual bad habits. And he kind of started that again in that third game, and it just pissed me off the fact that I didn't get to see him really finish that off and kind of become that ultimate villain for Michigan State, like I've kind of really been hoping him to be. But I agree with that about once he gets to this tournament, I think he is the key for Michigan.
Yeah, and that's something else I was talking to, I believe Craigen about after that State game. We're missing either a second-year Iggy or Mo Wagner. Like, he needs to evolve into Mo Wagner. Like, if he was a little bit more seasoned, I feel like this Michigan team, while I think they can win it all, we'll get to that in a bit, they would be a lot more dangerous and a lot more of, not a lock, but they would be a lot more consistent, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, the improvement that Teskey's made this year.
He looks great.
He looks so much better than last year.
Yeah.
He's shooting from the outside now. But I think what Michigan is missing, as you mentioned, is another front court guy that could pick up the slack, especially when he leaves, when he's on the bench. Michigan's not the same team.
Yeah, and something I want to get, I believe it was the second game when Chuck sat out Matthews. Yeah, and Matthews sat out in that game too, so I don't want to throw, completely out the window the results of those games. Yeah, say his injuries too, exactly. So both teams have injuries and it's a rivalry game, but both those teams looked like great teams for a majority of those 3 games, I would say.
So who's making the big shots, though, for the Wolverines in crunch time?
We already know who that is. Come on.
Jordan Poole.
Oh, yeah,
That's what you're going to say.
The greatest shot in the history of
Jordan
sports.
Poole, but all these guys, including Jordan Poole, have gone cold.
Yeah.
Down the stretch against State, especially. But really throughout the season, right? They've had their rough patches. So who's making the big shots outside of Jordan Poole? Let's say he goes cold, which I think he will. Sorry, Michigan faithful out there.
I get it.
But I think he will because of what's happened this season so far. Who's making the shots then?
See, that's the weird thing about Michigan's team. And they're perfectly constructed, but a little oddly constructed because their best player and their primary, not even just ball handler, but the engine makes him go. He drives the car, is Xavier. And we all know this. But
What kind of car does he drive, by the way?
Oh, he probably drives this Michigan team. If there were a car, well, VW Bug. You heard it here. Yeah, he's a VW Bug.
How about a Chevy Equinox, though? I drive a Chevy Equinox, so that's why I'm saying that. Bias, but so
cool.
go with that. Make me sound good and feel good.
Yeah, it would.
Anyways, back to your point that you were making.
But so he's not necessarily a scorer. Granted, he has that great, sexy little baby skyhook.
Sexy hair, mane, and
but it,
what a sexy team.
I mean, granted, we're biased as all hell.
You guys are. That's true. Yeah.
But in terms of like who you're gonna go to when you have to get a bucket, it's weird because I think what Michigan will do, they're gonna go to Xavier, even though he's not a scorer at all, and I think they're gonna kind of rely on him to create and then kind of play on the fly, whether it's going to the hole or hitting, like, I don't know, Teskey on a pick and roll, or getting some off-ball action with Poole, or even I'm blanking on Livers. I just want to call him
Isaiah Livers.
Bigger Poole because he looks exactly
Livers
like Jordan
and Onions,
Poole.
right?
But so like I said, I think it's going to be Xavier is going to ignite on the offensive end when they need like a bucket, and maybe he'll go to the hole, maybe he'll dish it out, but I think it's going to have to come down to him because everyone else is just too inconsistent. What do you think, Craig?
Craigen, I know you want to talk here.
Yeah.
Who's doing it for Michigan down the stretch, making the big shots? Outside of Jordan Poole, who has shown the capability of doing so in the past, who else can make that big bucket?
It's got to be Iggy. I love Xavier, but you saw at the end of that state game, Michigan would run pick and roll, and Cash just goes under, and you have Xavier standing at the three-point line, not being able to knock down a shot. The only guy that consistently gets the rim, can knock down threes, can handle the ball, is Iggy, for real. Jordan Poole goes cold far too often, settles for crappy step-back shots where he's just chucking it up. And Iggy seems to be the only one who really, when it comes down to it, when the game gets tight, can just catch that ball on the wing and decide, okay, I'm going and getting to the rim. Really, no one else on Michigan, I think, really has that power or capability right now. So I think Michigan really does have to turn to him in this tournament here if they want to make a serious run. He needs to become that primary scorer.
How in tournaments, like, you need to have that one guy. Like, everyone always says, oh, who's the next Kemba or the next Shabazz? Like, regardless of whether or not they're an actual Kemba or a Shabazz and they put the entire team on their back, you need to have one, I don't know if it's an NBA level talent, but someone who it's like, okay, this is one of the best players in the country. And Iggy isn't necessarily one of the best players in the country, but when he reaches his peak, he can definitely be that.
So who's making the shots down for Michigan down the stretch?
Well, for Michigan, you would hope you get more out of someone like Charles Matthews late in the game, too, because he's the veteran there. He's a guy that can, and he was good last year in the tournament, too, as well. He's a guy that can play good defense, and then on the other side of the ball, he's not been knocking his shots down this year at the clip he was last year. So I think if you're looking at a guy that can, with his size, he's, what, 6'7", 6'8".
And he's a long
He's guy.
lengthy.
He could be a matchup nightmare on the offensive end too, and drawing fouls and getting to the line. If Michigan gets to the line with their defense, they can hold any team under 60 points. They'll be fine. I think Charles Matthews is a guy in this tournament who has experience last year that can help him.
Just really quick, I've been called a long guy in the past too, and actually I think I'm 6'8" now. I just grew an inch or two. Joey?
Vito's the longest guy I know. No, the only thing I was going to say is I think part of that, I was expecting Matthews to fill the role that Brzdakis was filling this year, coming into the year especially. And I don't mind that he hasn't, because I think he's devoted a lot more of his, I don't want to say effort, but a lot more of his game to, okay, I'm going to be this defender for this team. Because that's the role he needs to fill. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, everyone kind of fits together really nicely. Like, they fit together perfectly. But then if just whatever reason, if one little thing's off, they kind of just unclick.
And let's look at who they're playing. Playing Montana in the first round. Now, I think everybody thinks they're going to get past Montana, and easily. Now, after that, playing Nevada or Florida. Now, could Michigan in the second round be susceptible to that upset, Craigen? What do you think?
I don't think so. A lot of people are talking about it, especially with Nevada, but I really don't think Nevada's going to make it out of the first round. Yeah, they're great. They're building off last season, what they've done. But like we've seen, they kind of choked down the stretch. They fell to that 7 seed after being a top 10 team all year. I think they're in serious danger of being upset. I mean, a 7-10 isn't much of an upset, but Florida's been hot lately. They've beaten LSU 2 times at least, maybe 3 actually. They beat them recently in the tournament, and I think Florida's kind of just clicking at the right time. They have the defense, I think, to take down Nevada's offense, most definitely. So I'm not really concerned about either of those teams, though, given Michigan has just gone through the ringer, I think, this year, having to play as tough a schedule as they've had to play in the Big Ten. So I don't think Nevada or Florida will be much of a scare to as experienced a team as Michigan's gotten to be.
and the Fighting Pat Ackermans too in Nevada. Remember that? The Wolfpack,
I was
led
about to
by
say.
not really by Pat Ackerman, but Pat is their
Well,
former
hey,
Detroit
I wouldn't say
Mercy
not led
student
by.
too.
He's a grad assistant, which is a very important job in college
Very important
basketball.
role. He's got a
Very
job there.
important
Nice job with that team too. How good the team was last year and this year too. And could Nevada and the Fighting Pat Ackermans upset Michigan in round number 2?
Well, I love our boy Pat. He used to play for the Detroit Mercy Titans, our alma mater.
Do you guys know who that is out there?
Yeah,
Hopefully somebody does.
well,
I've covered some games.
Antoine Davis. They may have
They've heard of
him.
Antoine Davis
Possible
talking to me
freshman of the year
on these airwaves.
Watch out,
Yeah.
Zion. He's coming for you.
Yep.
But there's a reason why this Nevada team has only 4 losses and they're a 7 seed. Like if you look at they're 29-4. We know what they did last year, having those comebacks against Texas and I believe Cincinnati, and everyone loves the Bus. They love Eric Musselman. They love the Martin brothers or twins, especially Caleb. Like I think Caleb's considered the best player offensively, at least. But there's a reason why they're a 7 seed. They are kind of streaky. They beat teams that they should, but usually they get in a big hole and have to come back. And I don't know, they're just very inconsistent. Yes, they could be streaky, and I could see them going on a little run. Do I think they will? No. I wanted to pick Florida to beat them, but I love my guy Pat, so I went with Nevada.
Now, there could be a lot of upsets, in my opinion, in the West region. I mean, Gonzaga has always been that team that's prone to the upset as the number 1 seed. You have Syracuse, who I could see upsetting Gonzaga. You have Florida State, who I could see making a run to the Elite Eight and to the Final Four. So I'm revealing one of my Final Four picks early here. But I think Florida State could do it. Hot of late, good ACC team this year. Leonard Hamilton is their head coach. Underrated head coach, too.
Well, Leonard Hamilton had that great moment. That was last season, right? Against Michigan when they were asking why he didn't foul, and he's like, the game was over. The game was over.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, until you said his name, I forgot
Yep,
about it.
Leonard Hamilton, yep.
So, Vito, I like Florida State a lot. I when I was doing a few of my rough drafts, I was penciling them into maybe the Sweet 16 Elite 8. But then, I was doing a little bit of research, and my little brother, Craigen, sent me this article. And for you guys know this, but I'll give the people some background. I'm one of 6 kids. I'm the oldest I'm the oldest brother. There's 3 brothers. Me, Craigen, who's a couple years younger than me, and Deej, 3 years younger than me or so. We're all very close. So Florida State's playing Vermont in the first round. And I don't know if you guys know this, Vermont has 3 brothers on the same team. They have Ernie, Everett, and Robin Duncan is their last name. And they're all pretty much the same age as me, Craigen, and Deej, like a few months apart. But that's just the coolest thing in the world to me. And they're not even the best players in the team. They get a lot of minutes, but their best player is Anthony Lamb. He's like a 6'7" junior. He has like a bit of a mid-range game. He's averaging like 22 points, 8 rebounds. He was the conference player of the year. I'll expose myself. I don't know what conference Vermont's in off the top of my head. But yeah, I just love those 3 brothers and Anthony Lamb together, and I think I picked him to upset it, partially a heart pick, but I think Craigen feels the same way.
Yeah, in Vermont, they were the regular season champs last year, and they lost in the tournament to UMBC, who beat Virginia. So I think that right there, that first round matchup with FSU, they're a long team, lengthy. They give teams trouble, but what they don't do well is shoot the ball consistently. And if they get cold, or if one of their big guys get in foul trouble, they're going to be susceptible to an upset. And a guy like Anthony Lamb, who is another front court member of Vermont, he could take advantage of that.
Well, that's the thing too about Anthony Lamb is he's someone that can score pretty much all over the floor. Vermont really doesn't fall into rut scoring wise because they can put him down on the block, throw it into him down there. They can have him step out, knock down threes. They're just a team that can score in so many different ways. Especially you mentioned the 3 brothers, all of them incredible shooters. Ernie, I can't remember, but I think he might be Vermont's all-time leading 3-point shooter. They just have a wide range of weapons that I think gives them the ability to really take down a team like Florida State.
So I'll just bring it to this. Who ends up coming out of the West? Craigen?
I got Michigan.
Big surprise. So why? Explain yourself, though. I mean, we've talked about Michigan ad nauseum already, but why do you think Michigan's going to get past all these teams, including the 1-seeded Zags? I mean, how is this going to happen for Michigan?
Well, speaking of Gonzaga, I have them going down to Marquette in the Sweet 16. That's a little bit of a homer pick. I've been a Marquette fan.
And Marquette has kind of played bad basketball down the stretch, too. Has lost, 5 out of 6, something like that. So a lot of losing from Marquette. So for Marquette to do that, you must be a little bit biased. I'm saying.
Most
to
definitely.
beat Gonzaga.
No, most definitely.
Yeah.
But I love Marcus Howard. I've watched probably 15, 16 Marquette games this year. I love just watching Big East basketball, but especially Marquette, seeing Marcus Howard play. I think he's that type of player. We talked about Kemba-type players earlier, And I think he's someone that can really go on a run. And I don't know what it is. I love this Gonzaga team. I think this Gonzaga team is great. I think they're Final Four capable. They've proven that they're a program that can get to the highest level. But there's still something about a mid-major as a 1 seed that just gives me pause. It just does. It's something about the pedigree. It's something about the way the tournament works. So I don't know. I just can't see them really getting through Marquette. I could also potentially see Gonzaga losing to Syracuse.
So it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, Craigen. How about Gonzaga being a 1 seed in your mouth? Does it leave a bad taste? As bad of a taste as it does for Craigen.
Well, so I wouldn't say it leaves a bad taste because Gonzaga should be a 1 seed. They should arguably be the second or third number 1 seed, possibly even the number 1 seed. But I just, crazy things happen in the tournament. In my bracket, I have Syracuse beating them in the second round just because we saw it a little bit last year with Michigan State and that 2-3 zone, and that kind of throws a wrench in everyone's plans. But also they have Tyus Battle, who we keep talking about Kemba guys. Tyus Battle's another Kemba guy. They took Duke to overtime earlier in the year, and I think he dropped 30 or 32. You get a lot of comparisons to Kobe on the internet. I think he watches Kobe highlights before every game. But so
I do too, but I'm not Kobe. I know that.
Yeah,
no comparisons to Kobe made for me, but yeah.
a few back in the day.
Yes.
But so I have Gonzaga losing to Syracuse, and then I have Marquette against Syracuse, and then I'm not as high on Marquette as Craigen is, but I think Marquette can beat Syracuse. I don't think Syracuse is that good. I think Gonzaga is way better than Syracuse, but I just think it's going to be a weird little fluky matchup. So I have Marquette and Michigan in the Elite Eight. I'm not afraid of Nevada, like we stated before. Texas Tech doesn't scare me, neither does Buffalo. And then Marquette and Michigan, we already know who I have going to the Final Four.
We know that.
Wolverines.
How about the Fighting Nate Oates? So you said no love for Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't scare you.
I wouldn't
Buffalo,
say,
good MAC
I
team all
wouldn't
year
say
long
no
too.
love. Go, Dom.
I'll give it to Dom here too.
I think Buffalo's the best mid-major team outside of Gonzaga.
I like that.
I think with their guard play, then they got Perkins, the big man. And I think if you look at that region specifically, I think, as you mentioned before, Gonzaga against that zone, either Baylor or Syracuse. Baylor's another zone team. So, and they have Mekhi Mason, their point guard, who played at Yale before, who his experience there. I think that'll help them going. I think Gonzaga's in for a rude awakening actually in that matchup. But Buffalo, they probably are the best team, and they're playing a Texas Tech team that has, if they get past the first round, Jarrett Culver, who's a lottery pick. The problem with Texas Tech, though, is they're another team that goes really cold at times. So I think Buffalo, with their scoring, they average about close to 85, 86 points per game. I think they're a team that gets to the Elite Eight at least. So
who do you have in the West region then? What's your pick here?
in my bracket, I have Gonzaga.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to pick Buffalo.
Dude, just pick Buffalo.
Yeah.
What's the worst gonna happen? You're wrong. Pick Buffalo. That'd be cool. If you have a Final Four pick that's Buffalo and you get that correct, you're a god. Do it.
Yeah, all right, I'll pick Buffalo.
All right, there we go. Let's do it.
Yeah, you know what? You would have a lot of street cred like our friend Carrick Jones, and if you got that pick right to where Buffalo, made the Final Four.
It's not about what we get wrong, it's about what we get right. So
Yeah.
just
Forget the
take
wrongs
random
in your
guesses.
life and what those are, because you know what? In these brackets, they're busted
It's
after a
all
while,
wrong.
right?
Yeah.
They're all going to be wrong. Like what we're saying right now, throw it out the window. It's not going to happen. It's not happening.
Yeah,
No chance.
it's not.
But especially Michigan. Come on. These biased two dudes here talking about U of M and loving U of M right now, who lost once again, let me rub it in, 3 times this season to
I know,
MSU.
I know.
So, of all teams to lose that many times to, it did happen to Sparty.
Also, too, that bracket, you have Buffalo, but you also have maybe the second best mid-major team outside of Gonzaga, Murray State, with Ja Morant, who 10 assists a game.
See, I completely even forgot about him just because I was like, oh, Marquette's going the second round just because I love Marcus Howard. But fuck, John Morant, yeah. Oh, I completely forgot that he's in this region.
Crazy.
Yeah, going back to John Morant, I don't know. I just foresee Trae Young 2.0 right here in this first round matchup. Everyone's going to be loving, this great John Morant. Yeah, versus Marcus Howard. It's an easy upset pick. Marquette's been down on the outs, but I mean, that's really all Murray State is. Sure, they play a fun brand of basketball, but they are just John Morant. And yeah, he's great, but Marquette has been playing tough Big East teams week in and week out. They know how to handle good scores. They know how to handle good players. And I just don't think that the rest of Murray State's team is capable of winning a game like that.
Ja Rule Morant. I wanted to say that really quick. So the thing is, you can guard him with your whole entire team then, right? I mean, that's what Murray State brings to the table, so everybody knows that. So does it limit Murray State then, Joey? And you can answer this. What do you think? Because we've seen the Antoine Davis factor.
Yeah, no, I was
at Detroit
gonna-
Mercy, a lesser school in talent, but still, is that a factor here, you think, too?
Yeah, I mean, granted, John Morant might be a better talent than Antoine Davis, but he's not up for freshman of the year, and Antoine Davis is, so who's
Like
to
how
say?
you threw that in there. Very
But,
nice.
But I noticed this a lot when going to UDM games this year with Antoine. He's a great shooter, but he's all they have. So as soon as teams kind of realized that, it was easy to shut down the team, even if you don't shut down Antoine. And it's a basic thing to say, but I think that's a very similar situation to John Morant, because he's obviously so much better than anyone on his team, and the kind of talent that Murray State just naturally gets is because they're Murray State. I just don't think he's necessarily good enough to have a Kemba run in him.
I don't see it happening. I have FSU making the Final Four from this region. So I'm going to leave the discussion for the West region at that and move on to the East, where Michigan State is in as the 2 seed. Now, Duke is a number 1, overall number 1, 2, been the best team from day one realistically. All this talent, R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson. But does something give maybe later in, this tournament against State or someone else? Joey, what do you think?
See, I think everyone's going to pencil in Duke. It's almost immature not to. The entire college basketball season has revolved around Zion. Duke got a 1 seed, and they're 29-5. That's a great record and everything, but they weren't the for sure number 1 until they won the ACC tournament. Because everyone, when Zion was out, they're like, okay, well, none of these games really count until Zion's back. They had the loss without Zion, but no, everyone was like, oh, it's still Duke. They're still the best team in the country. So I think there's almost no way Duke does not make it out of here. I think Michigan State's good, but I don't think they can really hold a candle to Duke.
Now, is that your bias working in against State, or is it just realistic talk about Duke being the clear-cut favorite in this region?
I just think State did beat Michigan 3 times this year. I just think Michigan, I'll spoil it a little bit. I have Michigan beating Duke in the Final Four. An obvious bias. I think Michigan
that's just filthy.
Like I said,
so inappropriate.
When those 5 kind of mesh together, they are almost unstoppable. They blew out UNC earlier in the year. We're forgetting they ran through this Big Ten schedule. Even if you beat a Big Ten team on the road by 8 to 10 points, that's still a very, very good win. We're letting these 3. Let's take out the Michigan State losses. They have 3 losses the rest of the year.
But they had 3 against 1 team.
Yes. No.
Right.
Yes. No.
Is that true?
Yes. And Michigan State's a very good team. But what I'm saying, I just don't think they can beat Duke.
Okay, that's fair to say. Craigen.
I will say, Michigan doesn't have to play Michigan State in the tournament unless they make a Final Four run. So
and then they lose again for a 4th time. But yeah, so that would happen again.
If we play State in the Final Four, I'll be afraid.
Let me ask you, so if Michigan loses that game against State, do you survive to live another day, or no? What happens to you, Joey Oster?
Would be more embarrassing to me, because I was talking to someone about this on Sunday. I was like, you know what? Even though Michigan lost to State in the Big Ten regular season championship game, it's kind of cool that Michigan and Michigan State, the 2 teams in Michigan, they played for basically in a regular season championship game and then the Big Ten tournament championship game. That's cool, no matter what happens. And they lost, man. That's the dumbest thing I've ever fucking said.
Yeah, that you flipped the switch right away, right?
So quick. And yeah, man, I don't know.
So how about the Final Four? Come on, tell me the truth. Would you feel miserable that night and the next day?
We've lost a regular season championship game, a Big Ten championship game, tournament championship game, and a Final Four, for all intents and purposes, championship game. Those are the 3 worst losses you can possibly suffer in a season to your number 1 arch rival. I'd rather lose to Ohio State those 3 times in basketball, obviously, than Michigan State. I would not. I would be skipping work the next day. We know that.
Would that be the worst good Michigan season of all time? So
yes.
Michigan were to make the Final Four, but to lose to State 4 times in the same season, is that the worst good U of M basketball season of all time, Craigen?
It would be a failure of a season.
So you couldn't even classify it as good?
No, I would never.
That's the thing. I wonder about some Michigan fans if they could even sleep at night and declare the season still as good. Because a Final Four run is good. I know Michigan's done it, though, now, too. Which U of M can say, so I guess they can compare it to last year and past seasons as well.
While it would suck, that would be a great place to be as a Michigan basketball fan, to be mad at a Final Four exit after the year after going to a national championship, 6 years removed from almost winning another national championship, especially with the football woes, which we won't get into because it's a basketball podcast.
Did they lose to Ohio State again?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think I blocked that out.
Yeah, that memory was erased.
Yeah,
or people just drank too much and did black out at the end of the night because of that loss.
And
maybe Joey.
And that's what I would do after the Michigan State Final Four potential matchup. So, yeah.
So back to the East region. Let's get our minds on track here about the East. It's not about the West, about the East now, and Michigan State and everybody else, including Duke. But it's not just Duke. There's VCU, there's Mississippi State, Tech, Maryland, Yale, LSU, Minnesota. Now I think MSU playing the likes of Minnesota or Louisville in the second round. I think that's fair game and really easy for Michigan State. I think State can make a run, and I think it comes down to playing Duke in the Elite Eight. What do you think, Craigen?
So I pretty much think the same thing. I have State going to the Elite Eight. I will say, though, that Louisville matchup is interesting, given that Louisville did beat them earlier in the season. But since then, I think that was kind of Izzo and Cassius. They were still getting their they got healthy. Louisville hasn't looked as good as they looked early on in the season, and honestly, Cassius is just too out right now. Cassius has a legitimate argument for National Player of the Year. If Zion wasn't Zion, I think this year would be the year that Cassius would win not Big Ten Player of the Year. He's already won that. He would be deserving of a National Player of the Year consideration. That's why I have them going all the way to the Elite Eight pretty easily. They're looking at possibly playing LSU after they get by either Louisville or Minnesota without their head coach. And that's considering LSU even gets past either Maryland or an upset of Belmont or Temple.
How about Yale? Give some love to Yale. Won the Ivy League.
I'll give Yale zero love. Ivy League teams outside of Princeton are a joke come tournament time. That is a core tenet of mine when it comes to picking my bracket.
Didn't Harvard get a win, or am I just imagining that? Wasn't that a few years ago? I think they almost got
Tommy
a win.
Amaker, maybe it did happen. Tommy Amaker finally made the tournament
He was
and won
coaching
a
them,
game.
and people predicted them to win, and they kind of almost won but lost. I think that's why I think they won, so they didn't win. You're right, Craigen. Princeton only.
And I will say, our boys over at Vermont did kind of dominate Yale. So I'm not too worried. LSU, sure, they're playing without their coach, but at the end of the day, they won the SEC outright in a conference that has Kentucky and Tennessee. They have the talent. They're not going to let some lowly Ivy League school kind of give them the business.
Now, you brought up Louisville. Louisville playing Minnesota. Rick Pitino's former school playing his son's current school in Minnesota. Now, see, I don't like Louisville. I can't root for Louisville because there's no longer that Italian stallion on the sidelines who's bringing his recruits and players to brothels. So I got to totally eliminate Louisville right off the bat, all joking aside. But I just don't think that's really a tough matchup in round two, whether Louisville or Minnesota win. And then I wanted to bring up this, too. A lot of people on Twitter and just outside of Twitter, people that aren't on Twitter or social media were up in arms about MSU only getting a 2-seed and U of M also getting a 2-seed. But then you can argue on the flip side of things, I think, that MSU still got a relatively nice draw in the fact that outside of Duke, who is it really that's so challenging for State?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, people were getting mad that State got the 2-seed and got in and was put in Duke's region. That does suck. But no matter what, if you're going to win a national championship, if you're going to go to Final Four, you're going to eventually have to beat really, really, really good teams. So you're going to have to play Duke somewhere down the line, hypothetically, if you're any team in this tournament, if you want to win it all. So State's just going to have to play them hypothetically in the Elite Eight. And State can like I said, I think Duke would beat them, but I think State can beat them. Cassius could be the best player on that floor in that game, definitely.
I think it's probably the weakest region, too. Duke is going to roll by their first matchup, UCF or VCU, and that's Taco Fall, the 7'6" guy.
Love Taco, man. He's sweet.
Really good around the rim, but just can't really do anything on the defensive end as far as Zion will eat him up, just go right around him. But looking at the rest of the bracket, Mississippi State and Va Tech are probably outside of Michigan State, and they're the higher seeds. They're probably the two best teams. Mississippi State has the Weatherspoon duo there. They can score a little bit. They play in the SEC. Va Tech beat Duke already, so that could be an interesting matchup.
Was that when they were fully healthy? I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
They beat them at Va Tech, okay. So I
remember that. Va Tech kind of choked that game. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Zion was still playing.
He was playing then, yeah. So that'll be interesting. They got Blackshear, really good big man, should be coming out in the NBA. Those are probably the two best teams, but I don't see them even making a threat, Va Tech and Mississippi State.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. Duke, they've just proven time and time again, outside of, they lost to UNC twice, both times without Zion, though. Exactly. Well, yeah.
And
Zion.
by 1 point. So I'd like to bring that up when you talk about the two teams, those two number one seeds, and who really is maybe the top dog in the tournament. Mm-hmm. You can bring that up, too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think, yeah, sure, I get what the committee's doing here. They are looking at Duke, and they're saying this is by far and away, when they're healthy, the best team in the country. But like you just mentioned, North Carolina beat them twice. Gonzaga beat them fully healthy early in their season and went 30-3. Virginia went 29-3 and won the conference that Duke and North Carolina are in. So it is a little crazy when you think about the fact that Duke did get that number one overall seed.
Now, Joey,
if Gonzaga doesn't lose that conference tournament to St. Mary's, then they might be the number one overall seed. Because it's almost impossible. If you look at Gonzaga and they're 31-2 with the conference tournament championship, and they beat Duke, who is the current number one overall seed when fully healthy, I think they would have been the number 1 overall seed, which is weird they got slotted to the 4. But
So, guys, really quick in the East, who do we have then? I think everybody's going with Duke. Can I say that? That's a consensus, Duke, for everybody?
Yeah, I got
Duke
Duke.
for all 4 of us. Now, I was going to bring up, so, Craigen, you already brought up Virginia. And being this great ACC team, a team that, stood up there with Duke and UNC and has all this talent itself, but I think is receiving some prejudice because of last year losing to UMBC in the first round. I think because of that, they're being unfairly judged this time around. Is that fair to say, Craigen, about Virginia?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, they've won the ACC now 2 years in a row, and they've won it in a year where not only has Duke been one of the most hyped teams in college basketball history, but a year where Duke's arch rival beat them twice, and yet somehow Virginia's coming out on top. There's obviously something there. This isn't a fluke team, a team that wins back-to-back championships in the toughest conference in the nation. Last year was truly just a fluke, and I think anyone that considers Virginia a team that doesn't have the capability to win a national championship this year, kind of a joke. That being said, I have Virginia losing the Sweet 16.
I completely echo Craigen's sentiment. That's the kind of bad thing about having both of us on. We just kind of bounce off each other for the entire time. But no, I have Virginia in the Final Four in the national championship, so not exactly the same thing. I just repeat everything Craigen said, except for I don't want to lose.
I can
in the
tell.
Sweet
A lot
16.
of repeating
Yeah.
of each other.
Yeah.
But you love each other. I love seeing that in brothers that
We love
deeply
brothers.
care, respect, and
We've
love
stated
each other.
this,
And
baby.
if you love brothers, more power to you. I know you do.
Yeah.
Now, back to Virginia.
Yeah, no, I have Virginia coming out of that region. I'm looking at it right now. I don't think. I don't really don't. Other than Tennessee, I don't like any other of the top seeds. I have Kansas State losing to UC Irvine. I have Purdue losing to Old Dominion just because I think Purdue is a bit of a joke. They have Carson Edwards. They're a good team. They shoot a lot of threes, but that goes cold. And I don't think Carson Edwards is that good. I have them losing to Old Dominion, and then I have Nova beating Old Dominion, setting up Tennessee and Virginia on the Elite Eight. And then I have Virginia taking that one. I think it can go either way. But like Craigen said, Virginia has kind of built this nice, solid program. It says it's been like 5, 6, 7 years. Other than Michigan, I kind of really want Virginia to win it all.
How about the reigning national champs, though? No love for Nova, who is the 6th seed, but won the Big East tournament. So coming out of late, winning that tournament, I mean, does that say anything and mean anything for Dominic Churko, we'll go with?
And coming from where they started getting blown out at home by Michigan, they've come a long way, and it's interesting to see now like the veterans on their team from last year, Pascal and Phil Booth, who have stepped up for Villanova. I think if you look at that region, Kansas State, their best player Wade is injured. Tyler Wade going into the tournament, and they're a higher seed. Wisconsin, they have Ethan Happ, but sometimes he disappears. And Wisconsin, we all know they have trouble scoring. I think if you look at that region, especially the bottom half,
It's kind of weak.
it is very weak. Yeah, I mean, Tennessee should get out of that. But at the top, the only game I'd worry about for Virginia is the Oregon matchup in the Sweet 16. I think if Oregon gets, I expect Oregon to get past Wisconsin and or UC Irvine and Kansas State.
Joey, what do you think of Nova, by the way? Any chance of making a Final Four run? As what would be deemed a dark horse this year?
I don't think they will make a Final Four run, but like it's almost the same thing as Virginia. They've built such a good, solid program with Jay Wright. I think they're probably gun-to-head third best team in that region after Virginia and Tennessee. But I just like Virginia and Tennessee. If they were in a different region, those would be two of my Final Four picks probably. But yeah, no, I just don't think Nova really. They could because it's March, anything can happen. But I think Nova and Tennessee Virginia and Tennessee are those two teams.
I will say, for a second, I had Nova going to the Final Four. I think they are definitely a team that's capable of what they won the Big East. They won the Big East tournament. Somehow they're seated lower than Marquette, which, as much as I was loving on Marquette and Marcus Howard earlier, that's kind of a joke.
Yeah, remember, once again, Marquette was good. Wasn't good down the stretch.
Yeah.
So that should be key in how they seed these teams, I think, too.
I completely agree with that. Nova, yeah, sure, they went 25-9, but they overcame a lot of early adversity, the blowout to Michigan, the
You
upset
guys
to
remember
Furman.
that loss against Michigan? I mean, I bet you guys didn't even watch that game.
Yeah,
Never 1 second.
No. I don't even think about that anymore. But no, I mean, they are bringing back. Yeah, sure, they lost a ton of guys, but it's not like Phil Booth is coming out of nowhere. He's an incredible player.
He's a national champion too.
Yeah, he's a national champion. They have that pedigree. Jay Wright knows what he's doing come tournament time, which I think tournament basketball is a lot more about coaching than most people realize. Yeah, sure, we talk about these great singular talents that can carry their teams, but really when the game tightens up and slows down, it really comes down to these decisions that these coaches make as far as substitutions, play calls, out of bounds plays, because that game really does slow down.
Yeah, like honestly, UConn having Kevin Ollie that year was such a big difference. Who could have thought?
Yeah, obviously. But Kemba was clearly a singular talent. Shabazz, sorry. Shabazz a little bit different too. You could see with how much LeBron loved him.
But go on.
And if you go talk about coaching, another guy that's been there before is Dana Altman at Oregon. With the teams he had before going all the way to the Elite Eight, Final Four.
They beat Michigan, in fact, 2 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. And they were going into the year, I thought they'd be much better. They had Bull, who's now sidelined through the rest of the year. So, but they've been playing. They're so good. Playing hot,
They're hot now, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with them. If you want to,
out of nowhere, and Kenny Wooten, who's replacing him, is a block machine. I was watching a little bit of the championship game against Washington, and then their point guard Pritchard, who's a veteran there. He's picked it up. His offensive prowess is really showing. He's like a poor man's Cassius. I don't know if that's a thing, but he does all the little things right.
How far do you have Oregon going? Just ask.
I have them losing to Virginia, but I
mean, as a 12 seed getting to the Sweet 16, that's a good pick.
Now, two under-the-radar coaches to watch out for. I don't know if you guys know these guys. Dave Oster and Carrick Jones. Now, I'm going to say, if you had to rank Kevin Ollie, Dave Oster, and Carrick Jones, tough to rank the three of them, but who would you rank number one? 1 through 3, Craigen. I'll let Craigen and Joey do this one here.
Gun to head, got to go with my pop.
To win a game, must-win game at Game 7.
One game.
In an NBA Finals, you're taking Dave Oster.
I got Dave Oster. He's got the fire. He's got the passion. He will not let anything other than winning drive him. That is all he cares about. That is all he will fight for. And I'll tell you what, man, he will fight tooth and frickin' nail for that.
Fight to the death and get it done, huh, Joe?
You know I'm loyal to our boy Carrick Jones, okay? He spent so many long hours in that podcast studio at University of Detroit Mercy, and finally he's in control of a soccer program over at Sterling Heights.
Sterling Heights, yeah.
And so just when you see a guy rise from those ashes like that at the lowly university that is Detroit Mercy, let's not
go that far. Come on, man.
I just gotta put my faith in Carrick Jones.
It's our alma mater, Detroit Mercy. Now that
I love it, but
that's pitiful. That's asinine right there. Okay, so I'll let it slide. Drink your beer. We're drinking beer, by the way, too, as we're talking here. I think it's really helping us develop and provide our points here. So, how many guys have Virginia coming out of the South? Joey, Craigen, Dom. So let's start with Joey here. Who do you have coming out of the South?
I have Virginia over Tennessee.
Just to verify, you had Virginia. How about you, Craigen? Who do you have?
I got Tennessee.
I also have Virginia.
And then I have Nova. Just spice it up. Taking Nova, the defending champs, not to repeat as champs, but to make the Final Four at least. Now, who are they going to play in the Midwest? Let's go now to the Midwest and to Joey Oster. Let's start with UNC. UNC is a 1, Kentucky is a 2. How deep do the 1 and 2s in that region make it?
Yeah, so pretty similar, I think, to the South. I really like UNC. Kobe White's that guy. I have a soft spot. I know Craigen does too for UNC point guards. Because Kendall Marshall, a few years back, he went to these Jason Otter basketball camps that we used to go to. So I was like, oh, he's one of our guys. So I see Kobe White out there, and even though he didn't go to Jason Otter, I'm like, oh, he's one of my guys. So I really like Kobe White. I think Kentucky is going to come out of that region because I have New Mexico State beating UNC in the Sweet 16. Do I know why? Not really. The way I kind of approach the bracket, especially with teams I don't know, I look at it like, okay, someone has already won this tournament. You know, if it's April or May, this bracket's already filled out. I just need to go back and look at everyone's schedule, and I can kind of rework it and do the math and figure out who comes out of which. And just looking at all the schedules and who's beating who and all that, and I don't know. I just really like New Mexico State. I just feel like there's something there in the numbers or something hidden that is going to give them this Elite Eight run. But I am losing Kentucky, who's going to make the Final Four.
Craigen.
Yeah, you know what? I really love Kentucky and UNC. It was really difficult to pick between this matchup. I had them pretty much penciled in even before the brackets came out. These were two teams that I was looking to put in the Final Four no matter what. They both play a really fun, upbeat brand of basketball. They can score from the outside. They can pound down low, and they really do grind it on defense. I mean, that's expected when you have two teams with so much talent with two legendary coaches. But, I went with Kentucky too. as much as I love Kobe White, like Joe said, I think Kentucky, time and time again, they prove that talent really does kind of trump everything when it comes to tournament time, and they do have that talent. So I have Kentucky coming out of that region.
Yeah, if you look at that region too, especially the bottom half, Kentucky has sort of an easy ride, other than maybe Houston or Iowa State. Iowa State has
Iowa State is a joke of a ride.
Yeah, you got Ohio State and then Houston. Houston struggled in their AAC championship game. They shot like 24%. They looked awful. I could honestly see Georgia State beating them. And then Kansas too on the top of the bracket. I could see Northeastern beating Kansas. Kansas is limping along going into the tournament. I'm not as high on New Mexico State. I watched a little bit of their the WAC is a relatively easy conference, and they don't really have a good front court. I think Auburn can roll past them. But yeah, I think North Carolina and Kentucky get out, and I think just because of the North Carolina playing Duke so much that they're going to beat Kentucky and get out. 3 teams from the ACC will make the Final Four.
Now, how about this nugget, which I know a lot of people probably know now if they have filled out their bracket, or hopefully do know. Kentucky didn't win the SEC tournament. Auburn did. Bruce Pearl at Auburn. Auburn, of all schools, right? A football school. Had last won in 85 the SEC tournament championship. Something of that sort. I believe it was 85. So Bruce Pearl has turned around this program hugely. Now, Auburn is a 5 seed. Would eventually, in my bracket at least, have to play UNC. And I think UNC gets past Auburn. And I think a lot of people will pick UNC to get past Auburn. But there are some other good teams in this region. Maybe not a ton. But Houston, I think, is another team that could be deemed a dark horse. But is a 3 seed. So can we really label a 3 seed as a dark horse, Craigen, too? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'd say Houston's a dark horse. I really thought hard about them going down to Georgia State in round 1. Georgia State kind of just does have that feel-good story. They're good 3-point shooters. They have kind of that mold of an upset team that can take down, especially if they're playing a mid-major. However, I don't like what I've seen from Houston. They remind me a lot of Nevada, where they're that mid-major team that kind of was building off years of success coming up. And yeah, sure, they have this great record, but you look at their overall body of work and who do they play? Who do they beat? No one. And I just don't see them having that sort of medal come tournament time.
So I was a little bit out for a second because I was doing some things, but I heard you guys mention Houston, correct?
Do you like Houston?
I don't personally necessarily love Houston, but I have some things that might be a little interesting. You guys are familiar with Ken Pom, I'm assuming? So for those of you who aren't, Ken Pom is by Ken Pomeroy. He does a bunch of super advanced stats on all the college basketball teams. So there are these, like, I don't know if they're called 12 rules, but there are these 12 kind of benchmarks or factors that every tournament team who has won it all has met throughout the past, I believe it could be 20, 25 years. I'm not exactly sure. But there are only 7 teams in this bracket who meet those 12 factors. And so I'll just run through the 12 factors really quick. You have to be in the Ken Pom top 25, 4 seed or better, in the top 25 in offensive rating, top 40 in defensive rating, 3-point shooting. There's a bunch of these things, but one of them is conference championship, either regular season or the conference tournament. So with all the teams that meet those benchmarks, they rank them. Number 1 is Gonzaga, 2, Michigan State, 3, Virginia, 4, Duke, 5, UNC. So far, those are the 5 I think probably expected. So the last 2, Purdue, and Houston. So I just think it's kind of interesting to look at. A little fluky because, like, the conference championship, because I've got to throw Michigan in there. If Michigan ties for the conference championship regular season instead of Michigan State, they're in that list too. So I'll just throw Michigan in there too.
But Michigan is not in that list.
That's the
sadly
problem.
for you. Sorry.
Sadly.
Okay.
But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that Houston is a part of that. Like that, those are all blue bloods, and those top 5 are probably been the top 5 all year. And then Houston, which is just kind of crazy.
Well, 2 blue bloods, right? Traditional powerhouses in this very region, in UNC and Kentucky. But Houston, led by Kelvin Sampson, does that give them an edge, at least in the early portion of this year's tournament, specifically in the Midwest region? Because he has coached for a long time now, veteran head man, has been very successful too.
Their star player is battling a hip injury, so I think that could bog them down a little bit. And Georgia State's another, is like I say, they shoot the 3 very well. That's a scary matchup.
Well, and Iowa State, who they could play in the second round, just won their conference tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So they're pretty hot. Yeah. And who did they beat in the final? Was it Kansas?
Kansas.
Yeah, it was Kansas.
Limping,
Yeah,
it was limping along.
I don't like Kansas at all. By the way,
I could see Northeastern and Georgia State beating as higher seeds beating lower seeds, Kansas and Houston respectively.
Yeah,
But no Fred Hoiberg at Iowa State, the former legendary Bulls head coach, Fred Hoiberg, right?
Yeah.
Really flamed out there. He might get another job, and I think he will. But
kind of
anyways.
funny. Me and Craigen have a legendary fight that almost went fisticuffs about Fred Hoiberg.
With Fred Hoiberg? Where you guys were directly involved?
With
I
Fred
wish
Hoiberg.
I was
Fred
rolling around with Fred Hoiberg.
We were arguing whether or not he was a good coach, which is not a bad argument to have, but it was 15 games into his first season as a Bulls head coach, so we thought it was necessary to, decide that by fists. So, we love Fred Hoiberg in the Oster house.
So who won in the fisticuff?
I always win.
You've always won. As a big bro.
That's very
That's a lie,
untrue.
right?
That's very untrue.
And obviously, I've always won against Dominic, too.
Hey,
So,
big bros
sure.
remain undefeated.
Big bros will lead, okay?
You're very long. You're very long.
I'm very long.
That on Dom.
That is true. I have the length advantage on Dom, to say the least. Okay. Now, UNC, Kentucky. I go back to those two schools because I think in this region it's going to end up being those two in the Elite Eight. Joey, what do you think about me saying that?
Yeah, I agree, but like I said earlier, the only reason I don't think UNC is going to be there, I think they could win it all, obviously, but something about New Mexico State, just looking at their resume, looking at their stats and numbers, everything just kind of clicked when I was looking at them compared to every other team. I don't know what it is, just a little inkling. I like them.
Okay. To Craigen.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got going in the Elite Eight, with Kentucky coming out on top, although I'm still very hesitant about that, and before the tournament actually starts, I might go with UNC. But yeah, I think that's fair to say those two teams are pretty much locked in for me, barring some very, very wild upsets.
The team we really didn't talk about in this region is Utah State, who beat Nevada, and also won the Mountain West Conference tournament. They're a team that play like a Virginia pace, but they do everything right. They don't turn the ball over. I could see them, if they can slow the game down against North Carolina, which is a tough thing to do, they can beat them. I like Utah State, but that's a bad matchup, North Carolina. And that's why I think that's North Carolina's toughest matchup, though. I think they'll roll by anyone to get to the Sweet 16. And then the Elite Eight, I expect them. So I think North Carolina gets out of that, the Midwest region, and beats Kentucky.
Now, how good of a matchup is that, too? UNC against Kentucky. Once again, two traditional blue bloods in college hoops. And then you could have, eventually at least, Duke against UNC in the national championship game. Now, for my Final Four, I have 3 ACC schools. That might be asinine. It might be ludicrous. You name it. But that's what I have for right now. Craigen, what do you have for your Final Four? Reiterate who you have at this point for your Final Four.
So, I got Duke coming out of the East.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Michigan come out of the West. Huge. I'll tell you what, not that huge a homer pick. They're a 2 seed. They have 6 losses.
At least in your
all
defense,
year.
I can say they're a 2 seed.
Yeah.
But lost 3 times to Michigan State.
I got Tennessee. Tennessee coming out of the South. Tennessee's just been. They've been too impressive all year. I think Admiral Schofield may be the best player in the country. I know I've talked about Cassius maybe being the best player in the country, but Admiral is just another player that is just such a damn joy to watch. The way he attacks.
Dunk was in the SEC tournament that you're showing me. Yeah.
Just the way he attacks every single game he plays, I just love. And then coming out of the Midwest, I have Kentucky. In the Final Four, I have Michigan triumphing over Duke. I don't know if I actually think that will happen. I am very afraid of a repeat of last year's
So really,
championship
your
game.
heart wants it, but
I
it's not
think-
going to happen, probably.
No, I really think if I really had to come down to it, I think Duke would blow them out. I just really foresee that happening. But I have Kentucky over Tennessee, and then Michigan over Kentucky in the national championship, baby.
So I have, we were talking earlier about my New Mexico State pick. I kind of have a feeling. I like when things kind of match up with each other. I like when the past comes back around. I like when past sins are forgiven, things of that nature. And the Fab Five never won a national title, and Duke was a major part of that. And the Fab Five is one of the most legendary, not even just basketball, teams, but just sporting teams of all time. And I kind of think that something's going to play factor, and I think Michigan can beat Duke. Because like I said, yes, Michigan has been fluky, lost state 3 times, but they're such a solid team when they're clicking. Like, they look so good earlier in the year. Like, everyone, people still agree. They're potentially a top team when they're clicking. And I got to have faith in Beeline because I wish he was my dad. I love my father, but I wish Beeline was my dad.
I'll just add real quick to something that people forget. People really do forget. Michigan dominated North Carolina earlier in the season. So I think that just shows that while they lost a state 3 times, they can hang with anyone in the country.
Yeah, I'm a little bit apprehensive about Michigan, and especially because I think in that region, Buffalo is very underrated.
I do.
They're a
agree with
long team too. They're experienced. They got C.J. Massenberg. They got Paul Perkins.
They beat Arizona last year, I believe.
Yes,
Right?
They beat Arizona. They played really good against Kentucky for a while. They hung in there at least. The Shai Gilgeous-Alexander team, but I think that experience and then their draw is pretty favorable. Other than Michigan, who's a really good defensive team, I think they can score enough though on Michigan, and they can match up athletically with Michigan. I actually think as a 6 seed, it's not that much of a reach, but I think they get to the Final Four.
Well, that's the thing. Like I was saying about Michigan, like I could definitely see them run into a problem with that Buffalo team because if something unclicks, Buffalo is so solid, and like you said, they've been solid for like, the entire year and last year too. That is the kind of team that I think if Michigan runs into, will give them the most trouble. A team that, like I said, is consistent. They're seasoned, that sort of thing. But yeah, I love that Buffalo pick, Dom.
Yeah, so I think as far as the East region goes, you got to go with Duke. By far the best team, and that's the weakest region too. Duke is lucky to have that region. They don't have to play. Really, the ACC opponent is Va Tech, but I expect them to beat them in a rematch. And then if the other side of the bracket, much tougher between Virginia and Tennessee. And I think Oregon can give with Virginia trouble, but I expect Virginia to get out of that region. So I have Duke, Buffalo, Virginia, and then, as we just talked about before in the Midwest, I have UNC beating Kentucky. And then for the final, Buffalo, Duke.
Let's go, Dom. I'm in love with you, Dom. Dude, that's a great pick.
I can't do it. I can't. Although I think, like I said, athletically they match up with any team in the bracket.
Yeah.
But you got to go with Duke.
Yeah. Hey, but really quick, just to remember when Kentucky with Calipari, they were undefeated. Everyone, this Kentucky team, blah blah. And the little Wisconsin team did beat them. And I don't know. I mean, but you gotta go Duke though. You have to go.
You have to go with Duke. Yeah. And then on the other side of the bracket, UNC Virginia. Virginia seems like the one team that can cause North Carolina fits. They beat them at Chapel Hill this year. For some reason, they're a hard team to slow down North Carolina, but Virginia's able to do that. So I like for Duke and Virginia in the championship, and I have Duke beating Virginia.
So outside of Michigan for you guys, who's the biggest threat to beating Duke? I think it's UNC, and actually I have the Tar Heels beating the Blue Devils in the national title game. Is that ludicrous, Joey?
No,
or do you see where that could happen actually too?
I like that instead of phrasing who wins in it, like who could beat Duke and not Virginia. UNC is obviously the best poised team to beat.
The
Duke,
best non-Duke team, right? You
Other
could
than
argue.
maybe Gonzaga, but we all know Gonzaga doesn't lose to like Syracuse or
They'll lose to somebody, get upset, right? It's gonna happen.
We got heavy hitters like Michigan and Buffalo in that region. There's no way Gonzaga's coming out. But I think Virginia has the best chance to hang with Duke. I mean, UNC clearly. I mean that's I think UNC and Duke are the two most talented teams in the country, but I think Virginia might be the best college basketball team in the country, if that makes sense, and if that's not enough of a cliche for you. But I like Virginia, and I would love, other than Michigan, if the narrative is they lost as a number 1 overall seed, it's to a 16 seed, and then the next year they come back and win it all. That'd be so badass. I think that'd be just the coolest thing.
Would be huge redemption, right? Like sweet redemption too for Virginia. Now I was gonna say though, UNC and Duke, if they were to play each other a 4th time, I mean, who does that give the edge to in a 4th matchup this season? Who does it give the edge to? Is it Duke or UNC?
I think it's Duke at this point. Duke beat them recently. But honestly, I think it's a toss-up either way. Yeah, sure, you could say if UNC had beaten them 3 times, I would say, okay, this one is definitely going to Duke, given that, it's really hard to beat a team 4 times in a season. But given that the 2 times UNC did win was without Zion, and when Zion did come in, it still was only a 1-point win. I'm going to have to go with Duke just because of that Zion factor. But at the end of the day, I think that is a toss-up. I don't think there really is any edge either way.
Now, at a certain point, too, I mean, how much does pressure maybe become a factor on Duke? Because Duke's been the heralded team all season long, yet UNC has beaten them 2 out of 3 times this season already. and just dealing with all that pressure. Like Zion's just gift from God, right? Generational talent. And he really is. But could the pressure become too much for him even? What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, right before you got into that, I was about to ask you guys, is anything less than a national championship considered a failure for Duke? And I think that's the obvious answer.
For sure.
100%.
Because all those guys are leaving after 1 year, including Zion and Barrett and who else, right? There's other dudes as well leaving.
And, just with the way that this team has been covered from their international Canadian tour over the summer when they were playing on ESPN Plus or whatever, ESPN3, whatever it's called, anything would seem ludicrous. If Duke doesn't win it all this year, I feel like everyone is going to be collectively stunned. Even though I'm not picking them. If I'm betting money on this, everyone has to pick Duke. I don't know. And it's kind of funny. We're just we've been talking about this entire time. Who's the next Kemba guy? Who's the guy who can put the team on his back and take his team to a national championship by himself? And the most obvious answer is sitting there with Zion at Duke. He's by far the best player. If the entire college basketball season is revolved around him. They're a 1 seed when they probably shouldn't be a 1 seed, but since he was hurt, that changed everything. If anyone can dominate a game and put the team on his back to lead them to a national title, it's Zion. And those guys he's leading to the national title aren't, Kevin Ollie and, the rest of UConn's guys. It's some of the best recruits in the nation with Reddish and R.J. Barrett, and obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time in Coach K.
So is Zion Williamson truly this generational talent? That is the next LeBron James, the next best thing in the NBA.
Yeah. Yes. And part of me is thinking maybe we're so damn oblivious to this. Like Duke is going to run away with this thing. Because I keep going back to, obviously we don't know how Zion's going to be in the NBA. But let's say the rules were in place and LeBron had to spend a year in college. Let's say he went to Ohio State or something. Ohio State would have won it all, right? Like LeBron would have been the best player in the country, just like Zion is. So part of me feels stupid as hell for picking Michigan win it all. And not Duke,
and you should feel that way.
I'm a homeboy.
But Michigan State might be the best threat, right? Biggest threat to Duke. What do you have to say about that, Craigen? And what kind of matchup would that be, you think?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. We talking about teams that match up well with Duke. I really think Michigan State poses the toughest threat by far. I mean, they have such a deep roster. They have a two-way roster. I mean, they have shooters all over the floor. You have Matt McQuaid, who we just saw him go off for, 27 points against Michigan. He was just locked in after that gruesome injury, which we don't have to get into. But, again, they're another team that can just play so many different styles. Cassius can make the team go up-tempo. He can slow them down. He can dominate out of the pick and roll. And, I think when it really comes down to it, I would not be surprised one bit if Michigan State was the team that could take down Duke. Given what we've just talked about, Duke they have flaws. Yeah, sure, they have Zion. Zion, I don't think, has very many flaws. You can talk about his shooting, whatever, but that's made up by his other abilities. But Duke as a team overall, they're kind of a crappy three-point shooting team, are they not? So I think State, you look at what happened to Michigan when they went cold from three against Michigan State. I could see that same thing happening to Duke.
Now, because of McQuaid, too, State has that advantage with the three-point shooting. Because McQuaid, I think, has really stepped up his game from last season to this season, too. Because I think you couldn't rely upon him last year. This year you can. Where last year they could have used him against Syracuse. And any kind of scoring they would have gotten out of anybody on that team last year, State would have won against Syracuse. And should have gotten it done, too, at LCA.
Also, too, Duke's had front court injuries, too. Bolden has been hurt. So, and if you look at Duke's games, they're not as good defensive rebounding team as they should be, it feels like.
Completely agreed on that, man.
So I think that if Michigan State with their front court can match up well with Duke's centers, Zion aside, Zion's just a man amongst boys, but I think Michigan State, especially in that region, that region is a cakewalk until you get to Michigan State. But all the tournament, probably that might be the best matchup as far as the team that can knock them off.
Zion and Vito, men amongst boys, is what we get a lot. Zion and I both. We look about the same height and length, I would say, too. Back to State, though, really quick. So they're big and all of that stuff, and bigger and better in the front court than Michigan, at least, right? But I look at Nick Ward, who's been hurt. He's back now and supposedly healthy. But let's say he's not fully healthy. They don't have Joshua Langford. They have to rely upon then other guards to fill in the void of Joshua Langford, right, and to support Cassius outside of McQuaid. So who is that going to be for State? So I kind of view State like they're still depleted by injury themselves. Now, they have depth, but I don't think necessarily a ton of depth at the same time. Is that fair to say? I mean, is there a question of how much depth they truly have, at least, Craigen?
Well, yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you look at what they're sure Foster Lawyer had that sweet game. He had 3 threes in the Big Ten tournament. But, I mean, imagine Foster Lawyer on the floor against Duke, right?
That's the thing. It's those big boys.
It's not
right. Is that going to really be any good for State? I don't think so with Foster out there.
Definitely not. But, that's the thing about Michigan State. You saw it throughout the Big Ten season. After State had that skid, I was kind of thinking, maybe Izzo is going to burn Cassius out. Maybe he should kind of scale it back, not worry so much about gunning for this Big Ten championship. But all of a sudden, he's playing Cassius every minute of every game, playing nearly 40 minutes a game down that stretch there. You don't really have to worry about bringing in a backup guards, really, when you have a player like Cassius Winston who can play that damn good over the course of 40 straight minutes.
Especially in a tournament. Like in a tournament, you don't need to rest anyone because this is what you're resting for. Exactly.
Yeah, it's do or die. It really is do or die. So I don't think their inability to really bring guards off the bench is going to hamper them.
So Cassius can have that great game, has had that in the Big Ten. Can he have it against Minnesota, Louisville, Maryland, Yale, and we all think that. But against Duke, mighty, powerful, heralded Duke, can Cassius have that game against Duke?
I think he can't. I think Jones is a really good defender. But he doesn't. Obviously, with Cassius, they about even out. The thing with Michigan State is that if they can find a way to play a zone, if you watch Duke against zone teams, they get very complacent. Like R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish, they'll just settle for jumpers, and Cam Reddish can shoot, but there's games where he just settles for ugly-looking jumpers. And I think, especially if they don't have someone like a bigger center like Bolden that can get rebounding, they struggle on that end and they're missing shots, Michigan State can take advantage of them. And I think the Cassius and Jones matchup can pretty much cancel out, and I think Cassius can win that matchup ultimately. So I think that is a very scary matchup now looking back on it for Duke.
Yeah, no, like you said, especially with Cassius, he kind of plays a slow game. Like he looks like an old man out there. He really dictates his own pace, and he's great at stopping and going, starting and going. And the best players, their team takes on kind of that persona. And if Michigan State is able to take on that kind of, not necessarily walk the ball up, but kind of old man, the way Cassius plays, that's kind of the blueprint to beat Duke, I feel like, which is kind of what you're getting at, and like you said, if they can get him to settle for those shots, which I feel like part of the reason why they do that is because they're these young guys, and who do, like, young guys love to shoot and stuff. It's only like as you mature, you start to realize, okay, I need to start going to the hole. And I don't want to be an old head saying, oh, well, Cassius is a junior and he has a lot more experience than these freshmen, but I think that does definitely play some factor. The entire factor, no. Like, yeah, Duke could blow them out, but I think that could, on the right day, play the just the right amount of difference to give State the advantage.
Is Izzo due to have a good March, too? Last year being embarrassed as much as they were, too, and him not playing Jaren Jackson and playing Ben Carter all those minutes instead of Jaren Jackson. That was a big, embarrassing moment, I think, for Tom Izzo in his coaching career at State, and in March, specifically. How about bouncing back and being due to make a run this year, Joey? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's part of the reason why those Michigan State games, those losses against Michigan State as a Michigan fan, hurt me so much. The past 2, 3, maybe 4 years, January, February, Izzo it's been a joke because State has choked and Michigan has looked so good in
Beeline has been Mr. March, truly,
they
right?
went
Not
to
Izzo.
3 state Big Ten championship games. They won 2 of them. They went to the championship. And the year before that, they beat Louisville, who was a 2 seed. Like, Beeline is March. It's not Izzo anymore, and it's kind of been a joke. But this season has been such a I don't want to say a masterpiece from Izzo, but pretty damn close. Like, it's been the best coaching job I've seen from him, and part of that is giving Cassius the full reins, especially in this day and age where we're going to cross sports here, but where you have pitchers going only 6 innings, or they have a perfect game in the 7th inning and you get pulled. He's playing Cassius every minute almost, and he's he's putting it all in because. What are you going to rest for? You're trying to win a Big Ten championship. You're trying to win a national title. So let's put it all on the line and let's go.
Cassius was a Big Ten Player of the Year, and deservingly so, right?
Oh, yeah.
Matt Painter from Purdue was the Big Ten Coach of the Year.
No.
I thought Tom Izzo deserved a lot of credit.
Sucks, dude. I think
Izzo should have won that award.
We were talking,
Coach of the Year.
We were talking when you were upstairs, me, Dom, and Craigen.
You guys were talking without me, by the way?
We do a lot of
I hope
things
not about
you.
me. Yeah.
No,
good
no,
God.
no.
I hope nothing bad. Only the best of the best.
But Purdue, granted they're a 3 seed, they're 23-9 or whatever, and they won the Big Ten regular season. I think they suck. Like, I know they don't actually suck, but like,
let's not use that language now. It's very offensive.
I think
to
they're
some
not
out there,
very
but
good, Vito.
Yes.
But they shoot a lot of threes, and granted that can get hot. But I think Carson Edwards is a bit of a chuck, and while he does put up numbers, he's a great player. But I think he's just a chuck, and I just don't think.
You just don't like
Purdue's
Purdue?
good. And we were saying part of that is like we watch a bunch of Big Ten basketball, being a Michigan guy, and like I just like Big Ten basketball. And like Craigen was saying, I watch so much of these teams, so I kind of see their flaws maybe more than I do other teams in the nation, like Villanova, who I watched a few times this year. But yeah, I just see every single flaw on Purdue's face.
Let me ask you, so if you had to win a game in March, are you taking Izzo or Beeline?
You know I'm going Beeline. I don't want to let you finish that sentence.
Okay,
It's
so
Beeline, dude.
okay, so
Come
you
on.
knew that was coming,
Yeah,
that
he's a
question.
king.
But I mean, how much consideration, even as a Michigan bias fan, do you give to Izzo?
Definitely
in
consideration.
that conversation.
But Izzo hasn't won a title since 2000, and I think that getting to a Final Four is one step, winning it all is another step. And I think Izzo and Beeline, while Izzo does obviously have that ring, but granted that's almost 20 years ago.
Long time ago now. Yeah.
And on like a lot of winning a national title, even though I'm kind of contradicting myself right now, is luck. Just because the way the tournament is, they win 6 straight games and it's 65 teams. Like what kind of organization does that? Why not just do the top 16 teams? And that's why it's so hard to win it all.
Yeah, it is.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say though, as much as I'm a Michigan homer, as much as I love Beeline, and yeah, Beeline has been Mr. March the past few years. If you're looking at if Beeline had a team from the start of the season, I would take Beeline. It's about that consistency he develops within their roster. They play their game no matter what. But honestly, you see the flaws in Beeline when it comes down to those in-game decisions. His out of bounds plays is something we talk about frequently with our childhood friend Jake Hirschman, where Beeline doesn't know what the hell he's doing when it comes to these clutch sideline out of bounds or baseline out of bounds plays. Whereas you have Izzo on the other hand, Izzo just seems to be making the right in-game decisions every time. He chooses the right matchups. He makes the right substitutions. If I'm going one game, Beeline or Izzo, I love Beeline, but it's got to be Izzo.
Just quick devil's advocate, don't want to harp on it too long. I think part of that may be just kind of the construction of the rosters. Like I said, Michigan has this perfect 5. Yeah, they have a little bit of depth, but this perfect 5 is kind of what they do. And while Izzo is making the perfect calls, I think a lot of that has to do with, obviously it's coaching, but I think it's like this is Cassius. Like the reason State is so good is because Cassius is arguably the best player in the country. Like not the most talented, but arguably the best player.
Real quick, Tom, how much do you love me? No, actually, who do you have winning it all? And then we'll go with the Oster too, and they can tell me how much they love me too. But
Well, I have Duke winning it all. I think they're the best team.
What about Buffalo though?
I have them in the Final Four, losing to Duke. Like I said, Buffalo is very underrated. They're a very long team. They're kind of like a Kentucky look. They're that good. Like they have the athletes. They got the coach. Nate Oates is a good coach. They won 31 games. The teams that win like that, I know they're in the MAC, but that says a lot. And they had experience last year too. They beat Arizona. They battled Kentucky. I think if they played again, they probably would have beat Kentucky. But Duke is the best team in this tournament, and I don't even think Duke is that good without Zion. To be honest with you, I think I could see them in that region. I could see them losing to Virginia Tech.
I know what you mean.
In the Sweet 16, and Michigan State would have a cakewalk on the bottom half of that bracket. But because of Zion, and he just does everything, every facet of the game. The other night he was 13 of 13 from the field. He made a couple threes. Doesn't even really have to shoot the threes. He kind of just takes like 1 or 2 a game. He's really smart for a freshman too.
Yeah,
he does all the little things right.
He's like a perfect player.
Yeah, everything.
That's why it's so weird.
And I was surprised too at his size. Like he can guard and get around smaller guards and everything. So
speaking of quick, I said really quick for you to make your prediction. And you said Duke like a long time ago, right? Joey now.
So I have Michigan beating Virginia. And Michigan is my pick. And I'm not even going to say all biases aside because I think this Michigan team, when they reach their peak, they're as good as any team in the country. Like Dom was just saying, we have to talk about Duke. If any team wants to win all, they have to beat Duke. With Zion gone, like you said, I don't think they'd be bad if they had a full season. But without Zion, when they know they have Zion coming back or whatever, he leaves such a big hole. Where if he wasn't there the entire year, yeah, maybe you see Reddish or RJ step up and become that number 1 guy. But like you said, back on it, Michigan, when they're at their peak, as good as any team in the nation.
Well, I'll say this much about Michigan now in defense of Michigan, which, by the way, you really would not be able to tell that I like Michigan more than Michigan State based on my comments here.
Well, we
but
need
I do
that
like
from
U
you
of M
because
more.
we have us on this side.
Yeah, that's right. I had to do that on
even
purpose.
us out, yeah.
But Michigan, honestly, if their shots are falling, which I guess is the case for a lot of teams, but Michigan, because of their defense too, they're a 3-and-D team, right? And their defense has been steady, Freddie, all season long. Under 60 points per game allowed all season long.
Beautiful, man.
I mean, that's beautiful right there.
yeah.
So if they make shots, they could make that run just like they did last year. So I'll give Michigan that much.
Yeah.
Now to Craigen for your prediction.
So I have Michigan written down right now. That's my heart pick. But over the course of thinking about it more, especially throughout this conversation we've had,
And through the drinking of beer
Through the
and all
drinking of
that,
beers,
kind
I'm-
of changed your mindset on a lot of things.
I'm on
but
an Angry
on this as
Orchard,
well.
so you know I'm going hard
Yep.
here. This hard apple cider's got me wanting to go with Tennessee, man.
Really?
I don't know.
Wow. Rick
Look
Barnes
at
and Company, huh?
Yeah, baby. Well, yeah, I just love Admiral. And if you look at it, okay, Gonzaga's beaten Duke. Okay, when they're fully healthy, who's beating Gonzaga? That's Tennessee, baby. Yeah, I know, crazy, mind blown. But it's true though. I think there's something to that. Yeah, sure, they're a 2 seed. Yeah, sure, they didn't win the SEC and they kind of let it slip away from them. But you know, there's just something about it. They have that road. They do get to play a choking team in Virginia in the Elite Eight if they do make it that far. And yeah, I just like what they have. They have the singular talent. They have a great coach. And they have, honestly, the resume. They've beaten those top teams. So my heart's going with Michigan, but I think when it comes down to it, I'm going to go with Tennessee.
Joey, how many thumbs down on his pick of Tennessee to win it all?
I never talk bad about my little brother.
But if you had to talk bad about your little brother, would this be the time to talk bad about him?
Like, I wish every year I have like a kind of a Final Four before the bracket is announced. I think who I would pick in the Final Four. It would probably be something like Michigan, Virginia, Tennessee, and Duke. Like, I love Tennessee just as much as Craigen does. Maybe a little less. I haven't watched him enough, but a lot of that is just transferred from him because we talk about Tennessee kind of often. But I like the Tennessee pick, honestly.
Well, you know what I love? It's the two of you and my brother
Vito.
Dominic Churko. And I love myself, I guess, enough to say that I do love myself. And with that being said, I'm going to let all of you guys go and thank all of you guys as well for all the time spent on this special edition of the DSP Network. Hope you guys enjoyed yourselves, and thanks for coming to the Delta Resort to record this podcast as well. Adios.
Thanks, Vito. See you, baby.
Glad to be here. Go Hawks.